The Star Sport podcast is brought to you by Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, funding dreams for over 50 years.
Close your eyes and pull like a dog.
And a new Irish record for Phil Healy, 22.99.
Christy Cooney hands over the Sam Maguire Cup to Graham Canty, Cork All-Ireland champions for the 7th time ever.
Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Star Sport podcast. My name is Jack McCarran of the Southern Star and I'm joined by Star Sport editor Kieran McCarthy. Before we kick things off, I'd just like to give a gentle reminder to our listeners and viewers to please rate, review and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. The Star Sport podcast is brought to you in association with our friends at Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, where your bank really does matter. Choose the credit union, choose local, choose community. Since February 2019, when we launched the Star Sport podcast, it has been our mission to bring the most in-depth and comprehensive coverage of the West Cork sporting universe to you, the great people of the West Cork sporting community. We've interviewed Olympic gold medalists, Irish soccer internationals, horse racing legends and everything in between, and somehow we've managed to keep it going for almost 4 years. And today, to mark the 200th episode of the show, we're delighted to be joined by West Cork sporting royalty in the form of Cork and Bantry Blues legend Graham Canty. Canty is the last West Cork man to lift the Sam Maguire Cup, and he's been chatting to Kieran about his career, his life in the GAA, and of course the small matter of the intermediate county final between Bantry and Kanturk. But Kieran, before we throw to your chat with Canty, and I promise, ladies and gentlemen, we won't delay for too long because it's Graham Canty, some reflections on reaching the 200 episode milestone.
Who wants to hear from me when Graham Canty's just waiting just in a couple of minutes away? But just take what you said, Jack. Yeah, a huge achievement, I think, a huge milestone for the Star Sport podcast to reach 200 episodes. Did we ever think when we started out that first day actually in this studio? What is it, February 2019? Is that 4 years ago?
Jeez. It will be in February coming, so.
My God, like that seems a world away. Like the world has changed since our first Star Sport podcast. And I think we had an interview with Phil Healy on that first podcast after the West Cork Sports Star Awards. But here we are, 200 episodes into the podcast. And the beauty is, this podcast is getting bigger, better and stronger. Anyone who'll see this Thursday Southern Star, we've a story about the podcast, and it shows that our listenership is actually growing. We're up 20% in the last 6 months, and that's thanks to our listeners as well, that more and more people are tuning in to this podcast, and it's just going from strength to strength to strength. But that's all thanks to Jack, to the West Cork sports people. If they weren't doing what they were doing, if we didn't have these incredible stories, we wouldn't have these people to chat to and talk about week after week, and we're just so lucky. This is a golden era for West Cork sports. Anyone that saw the Sunday Times a couple of weeks ago, Mick Foley, a friend of the show who we've had on this podcast a few times, he likened the Southern Star Sports Department to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, because we're just spoiled for the riches of West Cork sport, from road bowling to rowing, from soccer to rugby, from athletics to kickboxing. We've had them all on the podcast, and the beauty is that there'll be another 200 episodes because there's so much going on in West Cork sport right now. Sometimes our problem, Jack, is to see who can we fit on this week's podcast. You know, kind of sometimes it's a hard editorial decision to say, okay, we can't fit A on this week, but we can do this such and such a thing. So
the reality is, we probably have enough West Cork sports stories to tell that we could bring out 2 or 3 podcasts a week and we still wouldn't be able to fit everyone on.
That's exactly it, and it just shows, like I said, this golden era in West Cork right now, and long may it continue. And the beauty is, if you see the next generation coming up, like I suppose the good news for the podcast listeners is that there's going to be loads of interviews and loads of podcasts to come. The bad news is they're going to have to listen to our ramblings for the next 200 episodes. So you have to take the bad with the good sometimes. But no, it's just a huge, just delighted that we've reached this this milestone. And also say thanks to our sponsors, Access Credit Union. They came on board with us. This is a good while back now as sponsors. They saw the potential in the Star Sport podcast. They could see what we were doing. They could see it's a local brand here in the Southern Star, promoting local sports people, local sports stories, and it's just two strong local brands have come together. And what we have now is we have a really, really strong Star Sport podcast backed by Access Credit Union. So this is another West Cork success story. Okay, it's not on the scale of the Skibbereen Roars winning Olympic gold medals. Not quite. Or battling Bullet, Phil Healy competing at three events at the One Olympics, or even the St James's footballers winning the Carbery Junior A Football Championship this year. But I still think it's a success story that we need to kind of celebrate ourselves. And we could even see this year, like, we've been nominated for a Local Ireland Media Award for best use of digital, which is almost a testament to what we're doing in this podcast. So I think, we've 200 episodes in, but there's much more to come.
Yeah, and who better to mark our 200 episode than the man, the myth, the legend, Bantry Blues and Cork legend. I've used that word several times now. Well, he deserves it.
He's a legend.
So let's not waste any more time. Let's hear from the man himself. It's Graham Canty.
There's only one place to start this chat, and it's with Bantry Blues back in a first adult county final since 2001. That's 21 long years ago. So Bantry will take on Kanturk in the Cork Premier Intermediate Football Final on Sunday, October 23rd in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Huge occasion for the club, huge occasion for the town. So Graham, how important is it for Bantry to be back in a final like this?
Yeah, it's great. It's great, you know. Went down to the game there, went down to the semi-final there the weekend. Great battle against Avail. Two good teams going at it below. And the man, my pitch in super condition, big crowd there and everything. You know, Avail there gave it everything. Bantry gave it everything. Bantry just about managed to get out on top. But what it means to the town and what it means to the club, I think, is great. You know, 21 years since young lads or old lads or whatever you want to call it had bunting around the town for a county final, you know, an adult county final. So their adult team, their top adult team, looking forward to a county final. It was 21 years ago that we had it last. Like, but look, the couple of weeks now leading up to it'll be great. Just the buzz in town. I'm sure it'll be building. With, you know, businesses getting behind it, schools getting behind it, the whole club driving it and pushing it. So it leads to a great build up. And hopefully a good day come the 23rd. But look, that's secondary at the moment, really. I think it's just everyone enjoy the build-up, really enjoy the buzz.
As a player yourself, Graham, obviously you played in some huge games with Bantry and with Cork. So did you enjoy the build-up to big games? Did you embrace that fanfare or buzz, or did you try and sidestep it altogether?
Kind of tried to sidestep it, to be honest with you. It was, you know, it was just the buzz was the buzz. It was great, and it was great to be involved. And the bigger the game, that was brilliant. But at the end of the day, you kind of had to go out and perform, and you wanted to perform to try and do the best you could for the team. And at the end of the day, you probably wanted to go out and perform and win. So, you know, getting too carried away with the buzz, I was kind of maybe conscious that it wouldn't affect your performance. But I think that was probably built into me at a very young age to ensure that it wouldn't.
I mentioned Bantry's last county final 21 years ago. That was 2001. It was a loss to Nemo in the Cork Senior Football Final. We're going to skip that, Graham. I want to keep this chat positive, and I want to talk more about Bantry's two wins in 95 and 98, and I suppose more specifically 98, that big win against Tuhello. You were a young fella, I think it was your first or second season at adult football, and you won a county senior title, and you were lining out with forces of nature like Damien O'Neill and Mark O'Connor and Mick Moore, and you Terry O'Neill at the helm. What was it like for a young Bantry fella to look around the dressing room and see those legends of the town and of the club right beside you?
Yeah, it was kind of a bit surreal, but even leading up to maybe 98, I was about 18 or whatever playing that, which was great. But a couple of years previously, Bantry won the 95, they won in 1995, they won the senior county in 1995, they won the intermediate county in 1993. So it's kind of very impressionable, I suppose, teenager, 13, 14, 15, when all that success was going on, and you had all that, I suppose, buzz and everything around the town of, you know, the anticipation of playing in a county final. It was happening every couple of years there, where you were getting to an adult county final. It was intermediate 93, it was senior 95, we had another senior 98, and I think it was kind of that buzz that really kind of got me hooked on kind of football. And why I nearly kind of decided to, you know what, take this a little bit more seriously, because, you know, there's a fierce bit of crack that we got out of it. But yeah, 98 was great. You know, it was kind of nearly probably my first proper year in there with the squad or whatever. And they were a very successful squad. They had won an awful lot previously. Even a bulk of them had won an awful lot underage, but it's going back minors and 21s, and they'd won counties and stuff like that. But yeah, some of them, like, you looked around and, you know, you had 20 lads that the vast majority, they were, you know, they were forces of nature. Like, they were different. They were different gravy to train with. They had huge drive for, I suppose, for the jersey, for the town, for winning. And they were hell bent on just winning. They would do anything to win. And I suppose what they did do was train like dogs, train like animals, to ensure that come match day in, that they were kind of prepared and nearly battle hardened from the training sessions that Terry O'Neill and Doc Cotter and Flurry Manny and all the gang put us through.
Did it almost mold and shape you as a footballer then? Because you entered this environment, like you said, the intermediate title in the senior 95 and again in 98, and you were in with lads who knew how to win county titles. And we said, like, some serious footballers there, some serious characters, some serious men as well. So you were put into that environment, and it's very much either kind of sink or swim, is it? And you swam and you got your place in that team. Would you think that season and those years helped mould the future Graham Canty that we would have to see with Cork then?
Yeah, I think so. But I think, first of all, as well, I think I was minded an awful lot. You know, whether it was management or whether it was maybe Shawnee McGrath from a strength and conditioning point of view, or any of the players, any of the players really, like, they were all a little bit older than me or whatever, whether they were kind of 10 years older, or even 3 or 4 years old. They all kind of nearly minded you just to make sure that you were settling in, that you were, I suppose, enjoying it, and the performances nearly come secondary after that. But I was, I suppose, very quickly I was made aware of how important it was to kind of prepare well, and you have a chance of performing on the day. And, you know, it doesn't happen by accident that team are performing day in, day out, and they were getting results. But that's because of the preparation that they put into it to a man. You know, we're very lucky. We had, you know, Shawnee McGrath from a strength and conditioning point of view. I remember he kind of pulled me aside when I was even 16 or whatever, and to suggest that I do kind of, you know, a bit of strength and conditioning, and the word weights was mentioned, and Johnny just said, look, you're kind of, at the moment, you know, you're not going to be lifting weights. Yes, you are going to be doing strength and conditioning, but it's going to be a very, very different program to these 23 and 4 and 5 year olds. You can train in the same gym as them, but you're doing completely different stuff. And I used to just join in the core 10-15 minute core routine towards the end, but I used to do completely different stuff. As opposed to the rest of the team they were basically men. I was only a boy at, you know, 16 or 17 even. So I was very much looked after, and I think you know, I appreciated it at the time, but it was easy then. It was easy just to settle in and, you know, perform away at that kind of level then.
Who are some of the fellas, so when you think of that 98 team, some of the footballers that jump out to you that spring into your mind straight away?
Straight away you'd have, I suppose, Mark O'Connor. Mark was always there. You know, always in your ear, always giving you advice before the game, after the game, during the game. Daisy McCauley, then you'd have Daisy and goal, and Daisy was just always talking to you to make sure you knew where you were on the pitch, making sure that you were settled, making sure that, you know, if you had a shaky start, he would try and make sure you settled into the game. Then you have the likes of, you know, Damon O'Neill and Mick Moran. Mick used to say very, very little. But his presence alone, and I think his leadership, the way he'd every single training session, you know, he'd put in a massive graft, a massive shift. He'd run himself into the ground in every game. So that kind of thing that you kind of say, well, look, that's what lads responded to. It wasn't maybe, you know, maybe the 10 points the likes of Philip Clifford was scoring up the other end of the pitch, which was absolutely brilliant. But it was, you know, maybe the likes of Mick kind of saying, look, you can lead in other ways, without maybe putting it on the scoreboard, but also just in, I suppose, your actions as well. Like,
So on that Bantry team too was your older brother Jeremy. What was it like to share that journey with him?
That was nice, yeah. At the time I probably didn't appreciate it, to be honest with you. Jeremy was playing for a couple of years before me already. And you just kind of, you know, you just settled away in and kind of trotted away after him like it was doing for most of my life up to then anyway, just trotting away after him, like whether it was at home or whether it was in the football pitch. But yeah, you just kind of followed him away to training and followed him away to games and stuff like that. So yeah, it was good. We operated two different sides of the pitch. We kind of played in full forward line the whole time, as I was operating around the backs, full back line or the half back line. So yeah, it was good. Yeah.
Like we said there, like there were so many big characters in that Bantry team. There was role models, and I suppose it's really important for young fellas, and you were a young fella coming onto that Bantry team back then, Graham, to have those role models. And then you saw, like you said, you saw those fellas have success early in the 90s, and you wanted to be part of it. So bringing it back forward to the current Bantry group, again, like we said, it's 2 decades in Bantry. We're in an adult county final. So for young kids around the club now, young Bantry Blues footballers, to see the Rory Deans and the Arthur Coakleys back in a county final, like, this has to be good for Bantry Blues in the long term.
Yeah, it's great, below there the weekend, below on the Manway. It was great to see, Rory coming off the pitch there, and he had his young lad with him there, and he sold it for a long time with Bantry, and geez, I'm not trying to write him off now at all. Like, he's a lot of years left in him yet, but just that little bit of reward having a final anyway to play in. But the lads will tell you as quick as anyone, like, finals are there to be won.
Mm-hmm.
But like, they're there, they have a chance anyway. But I played with a lot of those lads there now, say the weekend, and when we were playing, we didn't have huge success. A lot of times, we went down a couple of the divisions. We've kind of found our feet now. Huge injection of youth as well, even from the start of the year. Even the starting team from the weekend, even to the start of the year, it's very, very different. You have a lot of young players there. You still have the more experienced players. They are ready and willing and able to come on, and I'm sure they're setting standards in training and showing a lot of the younger, less experienced lads, what it is and what it should be to be a Bantry Blues player. But I was happier definitely for the older lads and the more experienced lads. Even some of them there didn't even get on the pitch the weekend, but that didn't matter. Like, that didn't matter. They didn't hide your joy in the final whistle or the walking off the pitch. Like, you could see them beaming from year to year. So it was great to see.
Oh, it was brilliant to see. And like we're saying, in the 90s, it was a brilliant time for Bantry Blues. And we mentioned 2 fellas earlier, Dr. Dennis Cotter and Terry Riley. Talk to me small bit about, I suppose, the impression that they had on you as a young fella.
Yeah, so Terry O'Neill and Doc Cotter, like, so 2 of them kind of got hold of me when I suppose Cotter nearly had hold of me since I was more or less born or whatever. Like, we kind of moved back to Bantry when I was kind of 2 or 3. So Cotter was always Doc Cotter was always your kind of GP, and he kind of morphed from kind of GP to I suppose coach or whatever. Like, so he was coach and manager and everything rolled into one from a kind of football perspective. So he was always there. He was always in the background from when you were 2 or 3 years of age. Whether you were ill as a small baby, or whether you had a niggle or whatever from nearly 12 years on. So Cotter was always there. He was always there for advice. He was always there as well to ensure that if he ever thought you were getting above your station, he'd be good to tell you a couple of home truths and just rein you in, just in case he thought that you were getting a bit too big for your boots. So he was great that way. And then Terry was a great leader. Like, he had those lads there in '98, and they had won an awful lot, but they still had an awful lot. They gave an awful lot, but they needed someone to guide them. And I think that's what Terry did. Terry, I suppose, steered us all in the right direction with a great team around him. He'd be the first one to say that he had a great team around him. Like, but the 2 of them were very influential, when I was growing up, especially from maybe 13 to 21, 22, when you were either deciding you do a little bit of football or, that you do a small bit of football, one or the other. Like.
I'm going to put you on the spot here now, and this is one that Dennis Cotter would actually enjoy, because he's the fella, Graham, who told me this story years ago, and I actually asked you it before we met in the Oriel House in Ballincollig. Jesus, it was 2013. What's that? 9 years ago now. And I remember I was talking to Dennis Cotter beforehand, and I said, "Will you give me some bit of inside info on Graham Canty?" Because I wasn't getting anywhere. So he asked me to ask you about your Jack Russell in the night before Bantry's Munster Senior Club semi-final against Mild Rovers in 1998. So do you want to tell us that story again once more, Graham?
I don't really, but look, I suppose I have to, like, but Jesus, like, Cotter, like, yeah. So anyway, so we were in the 98 county, and we progressed on into Munster, and we got through 1 or 2 rounds. So we're playing Wild Rovers over in Dumanoir on a wet day anyway, and the evening before I was, doing a few bits and pieces in the evening or whatever, and just getting ready for bed. And so I said I'd go out and just put in the dog. He kind of lock him in at night or whatever, just in case he goes straying. He was small, Jack Russell. I don't know, he was probably around the place for kind of 10 years or whatever. So I was pushing him into his little house outside. Whatever way I kind of pushed him. He was kind of cranky the best of times anyway. He was nearly cranky since he was about 6 months old. But I kind of pushed him in, and whatever way he kind of turned around, he kind of snapped for some reason. And he just, so he bit my finger. So it was grand. It was easy. We only live about a mile from the hospital there. We just popped down to the hospital, got a few stitches and a small bandage, but it was grand. It was fine for the next day. It was lashing rain the next day anyway, so you were able to put a little bit of a bandage on and a couple of stitches, and you were able to wear your big gloves as usual. So it was fine, but Cotter got a great chuckle out of it, of course, yeah.
Of course he did, yeah. I remember he was telling me that time. He was enjoying telling me. He said, make sure you ask Graham that. And looking at that, even that Wild Rovers game, is that one of the games that you think it's one that got away? Like, obviously, great start with Bantry, but you're thinking of that, the chance to go further in Munster that year, and it just did not work out for Bantry that day.
Yeah, it didn't work out, but 99% of the time when you're beaten in the day, you're beaten by a better team in the day. A lot of things maybe didn't go right for us, maybe leading up to it. In relation to players, pick you up knocks or whatever, or carrying knocks and carrying injuries into it. But that's the way it is,
We mentioned Cork earlier, Graham, and you 13 years at the top level there, but I want to go straight to one night in particular. That was Tuesday, September 1st, 2010. That's the night you, as Cork captain, brought the Sam Maguire home to Bantry. And I wrote a big piece in last year's Southern Star about it, and it just struck me like it was one of those never to be forgotten nights. From the O'Learys from Whitty out in the bay, when the Cork bus was coming in, you were interviewed by Gerard O'Leary on stage, and just a buzz in Bantry town that night. What are your memories from that occasion, and where does it rank for you, Graham?
Yeah, it was pretty special, I suppose. It was probably one of the highlights of my whole footballing career, really, to be able to, I suppose, bring all the lads back to Bantry, and obviously bring Sam Maguire back to Bantry. Like, Bantry had done so much for me, the town, the club, or whatever, and it was just me maybe having an opportunity to kind of say, you know what, thanks for all the backing, thanks for all the support for all the years. Look, here are all the lads, here's the cup, and look, we can all enjoy it together, because it was great that that we as a group kind of won the cup, but it's kind of it was for everyone really to enjoy and everything. It wasn't for us to just take and have for ourselves. You kind of win it for all the people who are kind of close to you and special to you, and kind of where you're from. So it was great to be able to do that on the kind of Tuesday after we won it. Yeah, it was super. Yeah, but as you said, even the Whitty lads there, as we were kind of driving in the bus, the lads were saying, Jesus, who are the lads out in the boat there with the flares? And I said, they're the Whitty lads, they're the Whitty gang, like. So no, it was super, yeah. I'd
say the City boys had never seen anything like that before, had they?
No, probably not. And they were saying, how do you mean out in the boat? I said, sure. I said, the Larrys, I said, they live over there in Whitty. They were born and bred there, like, and they play with Bantry, and 2 or 3 of the lads there, they play with Bantry and still do, like. And I said, that's their commute, it isn't like my handy commute maybe from Bantry up to Cork. Like, the lads have to come across the water into training or whatever. So it it kind of hits home what effort some people put into just to play a game of ball. Like, it means a little bit more than just strolling across the road maybe to Wolftown Park, as a lot of us do, like.
That's the stuff of dreams, like a Bantry man bringing the Sam Maguire back into Bantry, and as Cork captain. And how conscious were you at the time, Graham? And I suppose, how conscious are you now that you are a hero and a role model for so many young people, not alone in Bantry, but right across West Cork and the county and even further beyond? Were you very conscious of that as a player, or even more so when you hung up your boots?
Not massively, but you would be aware that when you put on a Bantry jersey, you put on a Cork jersey, that you have to act in a particular way, or even away from the pitch, like that. You act in a particular way, you carry yourself in a particular way, because you would, when you have a Cork jersey on, near the inside, you have a Bantry jersey on, and you have a Bantry jersey on, you represent an awful lot of people from the town, not just your family, but maybe the town itself as well. So yeah, there is an onus on you to to carry yourself in a particular way. Maybe to do yourself, your family, and where you're from, kind of justice or whatever, because of the effort that they put into you. It wasn't just by accident that I happened to get maybe a trial there, maybe when I was 16, 17 or 18 and played away for Cork for a number of years after it. That didn't happen by accident. Like, there's an awful lot of people in Bantry, including, I suppose, my family primarily, that put an awful lot of time into me and gave me those opportunities. There are an awful lot of people in life just don't have those opportunities at all, like, and they're not afforded to everyone either. So I was very conscious of that always, yeah.
When you look back at that Cork team that won in 2010, like, it's what a football team. And I think with the passage of time, fans now appreciate just how good that Cork football team was and was to win the All-Ireland. So looking at it, like yourself, Noel Larry, Pádraig Hassan, Alan O'Connor, Pierce O'Neill, Shields, Donnacha O'Connor, Goulding, Kelly, my God, every line in that field had men and really good footballers. Did you know at the time how, like, coming up to 2010, like, you were so close? Like, so what was the belief like in that team going into that final in 2010?
I suppose we were building for a few years before. We won a number of national leagues. We had a number of Munsters under our belt. We'd got a couple of finals before that, a couple of All-Ireland finals, a couple of semi-finals. So I suppose being in Croke Park in big games with a lot of things at stake, it wasn't very new to us. Mm-hmm. We hadn't got over the finish line in relation to an All-Ireland final, but it was, it was another big game in Croke Park. It was another day where you were, you did everything right. You put everything in place to try and ensure that you performed. And if you performed well, give yourself every chance. It's a good chance you'd win. But that was nearly it, like, not trying to throw the kind of thing about the process, but that was the process. And it was asked to me a couple of times, what would you have done if you lost the down that day? The kind of answer is, you do the same again. Next year, you just, you go back, you work hard, and you come again. That's what you would do. And look, that's what we did after we won All-Ireland. We didn't win another one after that group. But, in 13, 14 or whatever, 11, 12, 13 afterwards, we did the same things. We knuckled down, we worked hard, and we tried to improve on any kind of couple of weaknesses that we had. But we didn't win another one, but that's really all it was. Like, it was give yourself every chance to perform on the day, and luckily enough on the day, our performance was just about good enough to get over down, yeah.
Considering how close Cork came the years before 2010, when you finally did get your hands on Sam Maguire, was it as good? Did it feel as good as you dreamt it would be, Graham?
It was good. It was good, but to be honest with you, very, very, very shortly afterwards that you won it, you were kind of nearly looking ahead, wondering and even planning how could you potentially retain it. Like, I think that's the way we were kind of hardwired as a team. And that's what we kind of did, You
had that knee injury you had a knee injury, then you had a hamstring injury. Was it against Roscommon you picked up in the quarter-final? So how close were you to actually missing the All-Ireland final itself? Like, was it a close call? Was there any point in the build-up where you were thinking to yourself, I'm not going to make it? Or was it always in your head, through hell or high water, I'm getting on that pitch?
No, it was, you'd only come on the pitch if you had something to offer. Like, if you were, if you weren't fit enough to come on, you weren't going to come on. But I suppose I was, had a discussion with Conor Coonan near the days leading up to the week or two leading up to it or whatever, and you're working away with the medical team trying to get as fit as you could. See, could you play whatever part you could on the day? If you weren't going to play, you were going to be in the group anyway, and seeing what support you could give there. But I suppose the last week things went particularly well. Kind of training went particularly well, and you were, I suppose, in shape a couple of days up before that. Yeah, you would, you'd tug out or whatever. Before it, I was nervous or whatever to make sure that the body would hold up, the leg would hold up for some part of the game if you were introduced. But I had a conversation the night before with Conor Coonan, and Conor said, look, how was the leg? And it was the same kind of conversation we had a number of days before. And I said, look, it's okay. There definitely isn't a full 70 minutes in it. And he said, that's fine. He said, it's no bother. He said, as you know, I'm not starting. I said, yeah, of course. And he said, we'll bring you on early enough that if the injury does flare up again, we can take you off again and won't disrupt the team. I said, perfect, job done. Slept away happy out that night, and managed to get in the pitch the next day and did what I could to help the team. But it was kind of, that simple, and the rehab and all that. I just left that to Colin Lane and Dr. Khan, the medical lads, to try and get that right. And you were kind of you just did what you were told the number of days, the number of weeks up towards it, to make sure that you're giving yourself every chance.
What was the dressing room like in Croke Park when you went back in as a group with the Sam Maguire in the middle of the room?
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was great. Like it was a very, very different dressing room to what I'd seen before. Like, I think lads were obviously overjoyed, but kind of relieved as well. And a sense of accomplishment. I think the way Head got there or whatever. But it wasn't complete madness either. Like, lads were just I suppose content in themselves, content that the bit of hard work had kind of paid off, and you kind of you just kind of moved on then after that, really.
Given what that group achieved in 2010, how hard, how difficult has it been as a Cork fan now to see what's happened to the Cork football team over the last couple of years, just having hit those heights again, like in Division 2 now? John Cleary's in there now as manager. The hope is that he can build a team to get Cork back into Division 1 and back challenging. But as a Cork footballer who captained an All-Ireland winning team, has it been hard or difficult to watch, I suppose, the fall of Cork football in recent times?
Yeah, I suppose, look, when you look at the lads and you look at the people involved, the management team and the players involved, and you see the effort that they put in, week in, week out, and month in, month out, and year in, year out, the different management teams that have been involved, the different players that have been involved, and you can see their effort they're putting in, and they're not getting the reward that that we would have got with the success that we would have had. That's tough to take. Because I know, and you can see the effort that the players and management put in, but it hasn't been good enough to get to the places where it kind of got the group that I was involved in, unfortunately. They're putting in more effort than we did. They're putting in phenomenal hours, phenomenal attention to detail. The management team, the players are putting in all the effort they can. It's just they're not just getting the rewards. There's a number of things probably to feed into that. Like, there's an awful lot of good teams around now. Teams improve. We probably stood still that kind of way for whatever reason. I was lucky enough when I was involved that I was involved in a phenomenal group of players there. We had a lot of the younger lads' success under 21 as well. So that kind of came through and bolstered us as well. So there's an awful lot of factors feed into it, but from what I can see looking in, as kind of an outsider and as a supporter, it's definitely not from the lack of effort by the management and the players. Like, but things just aren't clicking or whatever. Like, it's great to see John staying on and back involved with a good solid management team again for next year, and it'll be. I'm looking forward to seeing the team that John will build now, and hopefully he will stick. I'm sure he'll stick with an awful lot of the current group he has, work with them, coach them, and build them into a force that maybe can, compete hard for Division 2 next year and see where that brings them.
You retired from inter-county football, I think it was 2013, but the game has changed an awful lot since then. It's evolved, and tactics-wise, would you like to play in the current football game the way the inter-county game is now, or do you think it was better back in your day?
I think the last couple of years, definitely it's improved from a kind of, even as a spectacle or whatever. I think maybe there for maybe a year or two, because of Dublin's dominance. A lot of teams thought maybe the only way maybe to compete with kind of a dominant team is completely stacking your defence and not looking at any attacking dimension. I think Dublin came with such a force and such a team that people thought there was no other way to compete. But when you kind of looked at it and you looked at the template that Mayo had to try and compete with that very good Dublin team, and not to say that they are still are, but like Mayo just took them straight on at football. It wasn't good enough maybe on All-Ireland final day to win it, but it was good enough to bring them to replays and run them to a point or whatever. But I'm glad to see the likes of Tyrone and a couple of teams since that that, and Galway, the likes of Galway and Kerry, playing that good brand of football, that open, attacking brand of football. Like last year's All-Ireland final was an outstanding spectacle. I thought to be kind of a little bit cagier maybe for the first maybe 15, 20 minutes, and it was all out attack. Like there was phenomenal attacking scores, like some great defending as well involved in it. Like, but that's how teams can play football, and I think a lot of the top teams do play football that way. It has gone very tactical. It's gone very tactical. I think, you have to be a very, very complete player now to play it, because, whether you're in the full back line, you can be pulled and dragged all over the pitch, and you have to be able to get up and score. So that's definitely moved on since when I was playing. Like, you maybe had a couple of different types of players for the different regions in the pitch that you were playing, whereas now you need to be a very complete footballer, and I suppose nearly comfortable playing nearly in any position on the pitch. And your goalkeeper needs to be nearly one of your best ball players as well.
You mentioned there Kerry winning the All-Ireland. Obviously, David Clifford hit the headlines. Tell me, what Cork defender from the 2010 team would you pick to do a job in Clifford? A man marking job.
I suppose playing inside as well. Like, we would have maybe detailed maybe Noel O'Leary and a couple of players, but they would have been more than that. They would have been maybe the half forward line. So when you're looking inside, you're probably looking at the likes of maybe Michael Shields, put Michael on him and give him a nice bit of protection inside as well, and putting an awful lot of pressure on the ball coming in. But it's probably Shields you try and put on him and see how Shields you get on. I'm sure he'd do a good job, all right. Like, but to be a ferocious tussle, I'd say.
Even as backs and defenders, how much did you enjoy coming up against, like let's say, the iconic forwards back in your era, coming up against the Canavans and who carried at the time, the Crowleys and the Canadians and so on? How much did you relish that, Graham?
Yeah, like, I think, you were coming up against, some of the best teams and some of the best players, and it was, how could you acquit yourself? But it was very much kind of a team effort. There was never just, geez, away you go there, try and mark Peter Canavan on your own, or away you go there, try and look after Dara Kinnaid or Mike Frank Russell, or, when you move on there, the Gooch, or, Sean Kavanagh or whatever. Like, it was very much like, yeah, you're whoever is going to tag him today, but it's a team effort around it as well. You're going to try and limit maybe the amount of supply ball into them, even the ball that goes into them, ensure that there's a bit of pressure. Ensure that, when they do get the ball, that they've only one opportunity. You can only take the player on one side or whatever, that you have a covering defender coming across. Same things as all good teams are trying to do now, but tactics have kind of moved on as well, where, everyone's trying to create that one-on-one, that a sweeper can't sweep everywhere. But it's interesting to see. It was, I went up to the All-Ireland final this year. It was brilliant to watch the likes of Clifford and Shane Walsh, and they were obviously being heavily marked and heavily watched, but still able to, because of the skill and the talents they have, be able to kick massive scores from distance. Some of them from distance, some of them not from huge distance, but at tight angles and stuff. So it was great to watch, in the flesh.
How much do you enjoy going to different games? So obviously you go to the Bantry games, like you said there, you went to the All-Ireland final. Would you try to get around as many games as you can, go taking a few Cork games if possible?
I do, but to be honest, I don't get probably as many as I'd like to, just with whatever, you just kind of things on, you choose to maybe do other stuff with life or whatever. But I try to get as many league games as I can, try to get nearly all maybe the home league games or whatever, and the Bantry games. Then you might get, to be honest with you, might get maybe an odd league game in, and you get maybe all the championship games. But you try, even the odd county championship game, you try and get out and watch it, just even as a neutral or whatever. Sometimes you see an awful lot more going to a game as a neutral, whereas when you have, maybe skin in the game, because sometimes when you skin in the game, you're trying to catch and kick every ball, and you don't really take a whole lot in. All your focus then is just the result. But when you're there as a neutral, you can maybe, sit back and kick back and take in everything that's going on a little bit easier.
You stepped back from club football at Bantry. I think it was at the start of 2017 or 2018. I'm always interested for former footballers, when you do step back and retire, how do you fill that void? Like, had you pangsed in during that season to say, Jesus, I want to lace up these boots and get back out there again? Or were you very happy, Graham, with the decision you made to say, no, enough is enough, it's my time to step away?
Yeah, I think at the time it was just the right time or whatever. It was, you would, you were getting busy with work and busy with the family, and you had a couple of kind of miles in the clock and a few things you can kind of move around, but kind of trying to take the miles off the clock, you kind of can't do that or whatever. And the body was kind of telling you one or two things that, maybe now is the right time, maybe just to hang them up. And, I'm very lucky. I have no ache or pain now, and I can kind of, a couple of injuries that you had, they kind of all cleared up, during your playing days or whatever. So it was just kind of the right time or whatever. But you missed it. Still, you still miss it hugely. I still miss, I think, maybe competing or whatever. I think when I packed up into county, it was just very natural. You were just playing football anyway. Happened to be playing into county football and club football together. But when you stopped kind of playing into county football, you just played more club football. It was just the same thing. It was just, you took up football first day just to play it. You just happened not to be playing into county, so it didn't really matter. So that transition was simple.
Yeah.
You just played away football. You were still playing football. But after I gave up kind of playing club football, you just weren't playing any more football. So it was a different dynamic, and definitely missed being involved and missed kind of competing, whether it was just competing in a game or competing at training, and maybe testing yourself against maybe a lot of the younger lads, or maybe some of the better older lads, to see how you were getting on, especially as you were getting on in years. But missed that competing stuff, and you probably won't compete in anything else ever again to that kind of level, anyway, that standard. But it was great at the time, but definitely something I still miss. Yeah.
I remember once you told me about, like, obviously you gave a lot to football, but you said football gave you a lot more. I presume that's in terms of friendships, fun, the enjoyment. Is that what you take away from the sport as well? Okay, put the medals to one side, but the friendships that you made with the Bantry lads and the Cork lads, the fun times, the highlights, the experiences, are they the memories that you'll carry with you from your football time?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I was lucky enough when I was a young lad. I was brought out to Old Town Park and Bantry to play a bit of football, and I continued playing it ever since then. 30 plus years later, I was still playing it, but the only reason I played it was because I enjoyed it. The little bit of success and all that was great or whatever, and probably helped the enjoyment, but along the way I played a little bit of inter-county and finished up at the club. But it was just because you enjoyed it, you continue playing it. It wasn't all the success or the lack of success or whatever. It was just the pure crack and the pure, I suppose, fulfillment you got out of throwing your lot in every year. And most of the time it didn't work out. You didn't win the championship, you didn't win the league, but it was just that sense of fulfillment. You tried your best, and yeah, you came up short. Sometimes you did, sometimes you didn't, but it was just that enjoyment and that crack that you got out of, that you kept playing.
And even since you stepped back from club football, I still haven't seen you join social media. There's no Graham Canty on Twitter or Instagram. Can we expect it anytime soon?
No, I'd say, Kieran, if I didn't join at this stage, I'd say I'd leave it off. No, I never really got into social media or whatever. It wasn't massive anyway when I was, playing that bit of football or whatever. And even then towards the end, I just didn't really bother. It was something that, it was probably more hassle more than anything. It was something I could do without. And the way I kind of took an approach was, was it going to help my performance or not? Come Sunday, I just kind of said no, so I said I'd leave it off.
I'm going to bring this conversation back to Bantry Blues before as we finish up. And you mentioned Rory Dean after the game against the county semi-final there, that he had his young fella on the pitch, and you were actually friends with Henry Dean, Rory's dad. And Rory was telling me before, Rory's prized possession, his prized jersey, Graham, is your 2009 All-Ireland final jersey that he has from that game against Kerry. And I think it just shows, I suppose, the connections in club football, kind of from Henry to Rory to his young kid now. And it just makes it so special. And it just what brings the club and the community together, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's, Rory's dad there, Henry. When I was going to the club for probably as long as I can remember, Henry was out there. He was always involved with some team, some underage team that needed that little bit of help. That probably were guaranteed to win nothing, but Henry was still getting involved with them. He wasn't chasing success. He wasn't looking for the next big Bantry team. He was looking just to put the shoulder to the wheel to ensure that any young lads coming through in Bantry had a team to play with, facilities to play with, and would get some enjoyment out of the game. And Rory didn't lick it off the stone either. Like it was Henry kind of put a bit of platform in place for him as well, and expose him to the great game of Gaelic football or whatever, and hurling. Rory plays both of them as well. Like so, Rory was very lucky that he had Henry to provide that for him, and I was very lucky as well to have Henry in my life for so long. And even when you were playing or whatever, like Henry would always contact you when things were going bad, but when things were going well, you'd never hear from him. He'd always let you alone. So when you're after coming off the loss of a bad loss or a bad game or whatever, Henry'd always shoot you a text or give you a call or see how things were going. And he'd talk nearly everything bar football. He'd be just check in just to see what the crack is or whatever. Like, but he was very aware that way. Like, he was very in tune with, what was going on, and very in tune with maybe when lads might be a bit down or whatever. Like, but, I think he probably gave a great balance as well. Maybe not to get too high after a win, not to get too low after a loss or whatever. Just put a little bit of balance and things like.
And so the final question, Bantry Blues, Kanturk, huge game for Bantry. The hope is that they'll get back up to the senior football, and it is a hope too, Graham, if they can do that, they'll just inspire the next generation, like we said earlier, like the lads in the 90s inspired the young footballers around Bantry. Is that the hope that this win, touch wood, will get the Bantry train moving again?
Look, I think to be fair to the lads, even what they've done already, by getting to a county final, I think they have and they will inspire a lot of young lads, in town, maybe say, what, football, it's a bit of crack, whatever, I'm going to really buy in, and, I'm going to throw my lot in and see where it goes. But I think they've kind of done that already, irrespective of the result. We have a better chance maybe of winning if one or two of the Walshes maybe weren't available the next day. But, that probably won't happen. Like, but, Kanturk have a phenomenal side. Like, they've, they're dangerous all over the pitch. Be very friendly with Aidan Walsh or whatever. And, you have his brother Tommy and all the cousins there as well. Like, they're a force of nature as well. And, Bantry will have to come. They'll have to come with their A game, and if things go right in the day, you wouldn't know. There might be county success coming back to Bantry, but it's a big ask and a big ask of the team. But I'm sure they'll leave no stone unturned in preparations for the game, and even just getting there and having 13, 14, 15-year-olds an opportunity to go up to Páirc Uí Chaoimh and support their team in the pitch on county final day. Like, I think the team have even done that alone, just inspiring lads to maybe drive on and see what success and what enjoyment I think that they can get out of wearing a Bantry Blues jersey.
That's a great point, Graham, because they've won 4 games in a row for the first time, 4 championship games in a row for the first time, and Jesus, you're probably going back to 98, I would think, or 2001. So it has got the train moving, and hopefully it'll leave the station up in Cork on Sunday and heading back down to West Cork with a cup in tow. Touch wood and that. But you've been so kind with your time, Graham. Thank you so much, a gentleman as always.
No bother at all, Kieran. Yeah, enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
The Star Sport podcast is brought to you by Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, funding dreams for over 50 years.
Oh, what a man, what a hero, and again, what a legend. Thanks a million to Graham Canty for joining us for our 200th episode. I couldn't think of a better person to celebrate it with. But Kieran, back to our regular schedule now, because we have to look at this week's Star Sports section. Even though we've reached a milestone, the machine just keeps whirring on and on.
It just never stops. Like, we're already planning our 201st Star Sport podcast episode, so that just shows you here in Star Sport HQ. It, like Jack said, it just never stops. So this week's sports section, again, it's action packed. I've my own column is on the Castleven ladies, their incredible rise from junior C up to senior in the space of 4 years. So talking to a couple of people involved in that. Huge weekend coming up in the County Junior A Football Championship. We've St. James's are out in action. Beara representatives Orhan are playing as well. So we've caught up with both ahead of this weekend, and Matthew Hurley has a really good piece with St. James's with a couple of the players involved, Kevin O'Brien and so on, because What St James's did this year was brilliant. They won the Carbery Junior A for the second time in 4 years, and it was a team that was, I wouldn't say they were written off, but they weren't in the conversation at the start of the season. They weren't, I suppose, put down as serious contenders because we had the likes of Cora, we had Mary's, we had Kilmacabea, but St James's were waiting in the long grass, and by God did they pounce to win the Junior A. So we have that, and we've all the usual bits and pieces as well. So it's a really strong sports section. So do what you do on Thursday morning, go and get the Star. And
if you can't go to the shop for whatever reason, don't forget you can subscribe online. Just go to www.southernstar.ie/e-paper and subscribe on your computer, tablet or smartphone for less than €2 per week. Kieran, finally, before we wrap this 200 episode, I'm going to put you on the spot now. Any particular highlights from the 200 so far that you'd like to point listeners in the direction of? Any standout editions? Possibly the one that we were nominated for the award as alluded to.
I think we spoke about this in the podcast a few weeks ago, like that. We were nominated in the Local Ireland Award for our Olympic coverage. That was back last year, and that was one of the best days I've ever had working in the Southern Star. It was the Thursday after Paul and Finton had won the Olympic gold, and it was just mayhem here in the office. One of those days that go 100 miles an hour, but you just have to react. It was such a reactive day. So myself and Jack, we did a live podcast from Skibbereen Rowing Club itself upstairs there in the boardroom area, and then later that day we went out to Fintan McCarthy's home and had a chat with his family, his mum and dad, Sue and Tom, and his brother Jake and sister Caitlin. So that was a brilliant day. It's one of those days where you realise we're so lucky to do the job that we do, because we were just in the middle of the biggest sports story in the country at the time. But there's been so many great podcasts over the years, so many good chats. And even thinking of Larry Tompkins, remember that big long chat with Larry Tompkins? And that was 100 episodes ago. And that's one of those podcasts that you can dip back in, take in. And that's one of the great things with the Star Sport podcast. For let's say if you're someone listening to this podcast for the first time, first thing I'd say to you, what we do for the last 199 episodes, because you've really missed out. But the good news is, if you just go on to southernstar.ie/sport, we have a Star Sport podcast tab there, and we've all our podcasts up there. And it's actually worth some time just going on the website, scrolling down through, because you can hop back in and listen to some of the great guests we've on over the years. And I suppose even some of the contentious ones, Jack, remember we'd kind of horror on during lockdown. I'm not sure what lockdown it was, but he made a comment about Jack Grealish that was picked up by the BBC. It was
Sky Sports.
It just shows that
I think it made the news in Turkey.
I think it did. Even some French website picked it up as well. So it just shows that even though the Star Sport podcast, it's very much a West Cork podcast that the big boys are listening to. Sky Sports are keeping tabs. They're saying, what are those two boys in West Cork? Who are they talking to this week, and what are they up to? But we've had some great guests over the years, and I even remember with Tony Stevenson here before, actually in this studio years ago. He was a world kickboxing champion, and that's always one that stood out to me, because he was just so open and honest and raw in that interview. And again, that's one you can hop back in. But whether it's Fintan McCarthy and Jake again in the studio years ago before Fintan did what he did, or Darren McElhinney or Phil Healy, or even if it's Orla Cronin or Martine O'Brien or Orla Finn, like
it's going to name all 200 here.
Yeah, but it's just incredible the amount of local sports people we've on. So I would actually recommend for people just go and look on the website and just look at who we've on, and even hop in and listen to some of the chats again, because they stand the test of time.
Yeah, and just two that I want to mention as well. One that I really enjoyed at the time was Padraig Harrington. What about multiple-time major winner who has strong connections to Beara? He sat down with Kieran for a wide-ranging interview during, I guess, one of the lockdowns as well, wasn't it? So I'd look for the one with Padraig Harrington.
And he was actually very good. I was told like 20 minutes with him, and if people look back at that interview, it definitely went, I'd say, 45 minutes.
Padraig, when he gets going.
He was just an absolute joy, and then he just kept talking, and that's really one worth checking out.
Yeah, and then a personal favourite of mine then was when we had Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, a professional wrestling journalist and historian, on to tell us the story of Big Dano O'Mahony, the man whose bronze statue stands proudly in Ballydehob, the man who took on the world wrestling scene before your Hulk Hogan's, your Rocks or your Stone Cold Steve Austins had ever even crawled, I would say. Dan O'Mahony was the best wrestler the most famous wrestler in the world, and he came from Ballydehob. So we had Dave Meltzer, the preeminent wrestling journalist of his time,
Brilliant
to
chat.
tell us about Dano. So if you're into your West Cork sporting history, or you ever drive through Ballydehob, as I know a lot of people do, on the way to the Mizzen, and you wonder what on earth is that statue all about, search Dano O'Mahony podcast on the Star Sport podcast feed, and you won't be disappointed.
And if we have another 200 episodes, I'm sure the Star here will build their own bronze statues of the two of us in testament to what we've done for West Cork sports. So
they might not build it out of bronze, they might just build it out of discarded newspapers.
Will
that do?
That'll do. If it's some sort of monument to the masterpiece that we've created over these last 200 episodes. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the newspaper sculpture of Jack and Kieran. That'd be worth checking out.
Yeah, keep an eye out for that one. I wouldn't hold my breath though. Anyway, let's wrap. Thanks for listening to the 200th episode of the Star Sport podcast. Thanks as well to our producer Dylan Mangan and to Matthew Hurley, who's been a brilliant contributor over the last few months as well. If you enjoy these shows, please. I want to thank as well another some regular contributors, Ger McCarthy, Con Downing, who used to do the rugby coverage before he retired as Star editor, Dennis Hurley, anyone else, Mick Foley, as you mentioned.
Mick Foley, Hawley Sullivan and Diarmuid Duggan, who are our two GA experts. They've been on countless times over the last couple of years, chatting about county championships and even when it comes to Cork, helping us dissect with the Cork footballers. So we're like you said, we're so lucky that we've so many contributors who'll come on for a chat about what's going on in the world, and we have so many friends of the show at this stage. You know, I think we need a wall and friends of the show, because we need to figure out who's been on this podcast, who's been in this podcast more times than anyone else. I'm thinking could be Phil Healy, could be Finton, or the Finn has been on a couple of times. Martine O'Brien, we've been lucky enough to chat to. She's one of our good guests as well. So that's something that if anybody wants... Now,
if Matthew's listening now, Matthew, if you can hear me out there's something for you to work towards for next week. The most guested podcast, the sports people with the most podcast appearances. Yeah, there we go. Front page of next week's Southern Star, no doubt. If you enjoy these shows anyway, please make sure to rate, review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Slán Tong.